Hi guys, we're joined by AML Watcher and Global Association of Forensic Accountants. The topic for this today's webinar is the hidden price of compliance gaps. Why exactly are AML failures a major risk for the banks? As you guys know, as money laundering schemes are growing more complex, traditional AML systems are increasingly failing to keep up, and which is costing banks and the financial institutions both financially and reputationally. The false positives overwhelm these institutes and their compliance teams, while missed risk also open the doors for severe penalties. This webinar will dive deep into the real-world failures of the current AML frameworks and also explore how AML, especially the agentic AML frameworks, are helping banks with reduced and minimized cost and enhanced decision making. We're joined by Miss Mariam, who's the head of Emil Watcher at MENA, and she brings experience of more than 5 years with the RegTech industry. And Miss Kamaljeet, who's got experience of more than 2 decades with forensic accounting, anti-money laundering, cybersecurity, regulatory compliance. She's a trainer, she's an advisor. I could go on and on, but I'll just head over the floor to both these brilliant minds today. So how are you
Thank
guys, Miss Parry, Miss Kamalji?
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Daniel. And it's a pleasure to be here and interact with all of you here. Happy to interact and take this conversation ahead.
Yeah,
Perfect.
thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Daniel. And of course, expecting a lot from the today's discussion. Of course, the topic is like you can say right according to the current trends that we are looking globally around AML and compliance landscape. And of course, yeah, looking forward to it.
Right. So my first question would be an open floor question to both of you. Um, Money laundering has been a growing threat to the bank since forever. But particularly, what do you think that what's different about the 2026 landscape? Recent years. How is AML a threat to banks or financial institutions this year, 2026?
So, if I had to answer this question, I would say that today we are in the era of agentic frauds, something which is unfortunate, but this is what it is. If you look at the global statistics, the frauds, there's a blurred line between frauds and money laundering now. We used to have a fraud called synthetic identity theft or synthetic identity. Today, in 26, we have seen the surge in these kind of frauds as high as 900%, and something which connects with money laundering a lot. So, with help of technology and specifically with artificial intelligence, today money laundering is very different than it used to be. The size of money laundering, the way it is being conducted, it has changed a lot in last couple of years. Specifically, from end of 2025 to 2026, in last couple of months, we have seen a very different trends of money laundering. These days, frauds are cyber enabled. Each and every kind of money laundering or fraud we see in the market is powered by technology and now powered by AI. The another thing which is very worrisome is today money laundering is no longer going through traditional route it used to. You name, and today we have a very different and innovative way of money laundering. For example, gaming, cryptocurrency, misuse of blockchain technology, and so on. So the kind of money laundering we used to see before, it has really changed a lot. Apart from that, I think the speed and dynamics of laundering the money has also really gone up. Earlier, there used to be a traditional pattern, a big amount broken into small pieces, what you would call smurfing or structuring. Now, today, the transaction happens at very fast speed. And sometime by the time bank officer will get to know about it. It's too late. So that speed is another element which is happening in 26 in money laundering. Altogether, the scene doesn't seem too nice to me.
Right.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
with the advancement of technologies, it's actually an advantage as well as a disadvantage. You see more complex sort of frauds. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
And
Yes, please.
there is another thing that if we look at the other party in the whole scope, that is the regulators. With the new FATF regulations, the roundtable coming up in 2026, the AMLA in European Union, and the thing is that regulators are now asking for the proof of effectiveness as well. So that's why the banks are also, apart from agentic AI and all these things, they're also, forced to look at the whole scope of compliance from a very different perspective. And I totally agree with Kamaljeet on the aspect that the speed has increased. There are AI based identities being created that are used. Of course, there is a case of trade based money laundering as well, where IGAFA has a lot of you can say understanding there, and it falls under their scope of how trade is being used to launder money. So apart from the AI, the you can say the way the fraud is being structured is changing. This the transactions are happening really fast, and we should not forget that the other element is the governments as well, the corporates, the banks, who want to add everyone into the financial circle. If you look at the African landscape, because we are working in the MENA region, we see a lot of traction happening right now for the last couple of years, and a lot of traction happening around adding those countries and those people into the financial circle, giving them all the the access to the international financial circles, and online payments and everything. But when they go there, their regulators are not as much enabled as if you talk about those who are in some of the Gulf countries or in the European region and the American region. So yes, these are also the elements, but once they are connected to the Europeans, the American region, the Asia Pacific ones, that also adds another layer of threat for the banks. So all this is adding up to the whole money laundering threat for the banks, and of course the other, like the fintechs and the digital banks as well, because they are also now equally invested into and being used by the companies and everyone when it comes to the financial transactions.
So the globalized economy basically makes it more complex. You know,
Yes, and the
Globalized economy.
regulations, yeah, and they just keep on changing. The regulations keep on changing.
Perfect, perfect.
Very
All
true.
right. So Global, you've got more than 2 decades of experience. You've seen how AML, anti-money laundering, has evolved over the years. Now, I'd like to, ask specifically. We've been hearing agentic AI, generative AI, a lot these days as compared to previous decade or last few years. What is fundamentally different about these agentic AI as compared to the previous or earlier AI or ML models?
Correct. So I would put it this way that I always prefer to compare artificial intelligence with a small child. How an infant learns to speak, behave, and of course think. This is how AI has actually originated. And are two wings of AI which we are using a lot. One is generative, second is agentic. So first let's understand what is the difference between two. Each time we give a prompt to generate a text, image, video, we are basically dealing with generative AI. So generative AI is something which helps us generating contents. However, it may require human inputs, the prompts. What do you want? What kind of pictures do you want? So and so forth. It can do wonders. However, it is as good as your prompt is. Right? The agentic AI is something which has its own mind. You give them a instruction that this is what I want, and leave all the rest ahead on the technology. Agentic AI has its own way to interpret the things, analyze things, and execute it. For example, in anti money laundering, there is something called SAR or STR reporting. One of the big challenge regulators face with financial institutions worldwide, the kind of narration they receive with SAR. Sometimes it is not clear enough to understand. Sometimes they may need a lot of clarifications over it. With the help of technology and AI, the SAR are being written by AI. In agentic, with agentic AI, the agent can do multiple tasks together. On real time, it can dissect the data, interpret what is happening, get into transaction, and at the same time filing the SAR with a perfect narrative. So why agentic AI is very useful for anti-money laundering? Because agents are able to do multitasking and very effectively and efficiently. I wouldn't say that they can replace the human entirely, but let's say about 60 to 70% task is taken care. The rest 30%, the high risk cases, high risk customers are left for human intelligence. Because agentic AI majorly will look at the previous cases, understand the pattern, and then behave accordingly. There could always be certain scenario which are new. The first time probably it has come. So that's where human intelligence definitely adds on. Why I think agentic AI is also very useful, because the human has more time in hand to actually look at the riskier pattern, something where they need to investigate it further. The rest work which are repetitive, something which has already occurred, let the technology handle it. So that's the core difference between agentic and generative AI.
So with the help of agentic AI, you can actually increase your scale, increase your traffic, increase your volumes as well. You know,
Correct. Correct. So with less resources, efficiencies can go up. And this is one of the major reasons that the banks across the world are able to cut the cost and increase their profitability and efficiencies.
so another follow-up question, with this is, how would we actually maintain higher accuracy with agentic AI? Because we've heard agentic AIs have hallucinations or different shortfalls. So, it automatically also, it does about 60-70% of the task that compliance officer work, as you stated. But how would we, check if the accuracy is also maintained?
Correct. Mariam, if I may.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Sure. So, for example, one of the case which is one of the pain area in anti-money laundering is the screening. Each time we screen a customer, there is always a potential to get a false positive, and also there is a potential to get a false negative. So far, across the world, AML uses rule-based anti-money laundering, but those rules are static. With agentic AI, these rule-based AML is dynamic. It changes, it adapts. So, for example, if we are screening a customer, let's say ABC Limited, now this entity will be checked thoroughly by agentic AI from multiple sources, multiple AI, multiple internal, external sources to correct the dots, to get the right result whether this ABC Limited is same as mentioned in the sanction list or not. With this, the probability of false positives and negatives drastically goes down.
All right, all right. So Mariam, Kawal just mentioned about screening solutions, right? So, another question that comes to mind is, are screening solutions shortcoming really impacting AML programs' effectiveness?
Yes,
And
of
if
course.
so, how?
Yeah,
How?
because that is happening a lot because when we talk to the compliance people who are managing from banks to the exchanges to fintechs and everything, And one of the things is that with the changing time, as Kamaljeet said, that banks are also depending on the AI-based solutions a lot. Everyone is depending a lot on these systems. But one of the things is that not everyone is trained enough to use these systems. And the next question will be why AI is here to make things easier for us, then why everyone has to be, what's the big thing in using a system? You just have to put a name in it. But the thing is that not every other solution is designed to, make it easier for the compliance people to use it, for the compliance people coming from different sectors to use it. This is one of the things that, aligns with how the behavior of the compliance people and the the systems that the tech industry is designing is impacting this, and there is a shortfall. And the second thing that we see is that, of course, saying that there is AI and then actually having an AI element into the systems is also one of the rising threat that we see in the tech industry these days. It's very easy to, put some kind of a model behind your system and say that it's AI based and everything. But is it actually AI based? Is the system actually able to work on your behalf and help you take a right decision? Because in compliance, of course, like I work with compliance people a lot, and Kamaljeet, of course, knows the depths of that. So it's not only that you put the name of the person and the system tells it's here or not. You have to look into the depths of that. Okay, what's the origin of this person, the country? Is it impacting? Is it related to our policy? And is it related to his other transactions? Okay, what's his company? What is the business that they're doing? So all these things, and then of course, the other important thing, the way the world is changing, are the systems are actually also changing according to that. The way the political shifts are happening around the world, they are impacting the policies, but the systems are adopting that or not? I don't think so they are. So this is one of the things where I see the shortfall happening if the system is actually not AI based. If it is, then it will, of course, take those things into consideration. Then, of course, uh, a very important thing is the transliteration thing that I see a lot of people complaining about it. That one again, I use the reference of our region, in the one in which I am working, the Arabic language, and then the Arabic language has different kinds of transcripts within one single language. And then there are the Asian languages, very difficult to decode. So the you can say the legacy systems that are being heavily used in these systems as in these regions as well, they do have a shortfall in that case as well. And they are somehow not using AI to the fullest right now. And a lot of false positives and false negatives are happening. It's very easy to differentiate two English names, but difficult to differentiate two Arabic names. The Arabic names, especially coming from the Egyptian background, they could be as long as, you can say, 5 to 6 names, one single person. And every whole different watch list will have that person listed in a way with a very different name, or or kind of an AKA. So yes, of course, there are some of these things that do create a shortfall on behalf of the technical systems.
Correct. And
So,
even
yeah.
agree with Mariam and say, in fact, it the screening also depends a lot as to how people pronounce the name in local language. For example, one name which is very common in India is Ram, but if somebody from outside India will pronounce this name, it's called Rama. Now, how you pronounce, how you write, and that's
Hmm.
how the screening result may depend a lot as to how that name or spellings are written in the respective jurisdictional databases. And that has created a lot of difference in multiple real life cases where just with the change of spelling, you get a very different results. Another angle which I just want to add very, very briefly is there are a lot of screening solutions available, but which targets only English language. There are a lot of news which is available in the local languages, which could be really, really crucial for our screening, but that's been missed out. And that is, I personally see, is one of the very big gap when it comes to screening of the customers.
Hmm. Yeah, because they have limited language scope, most of the systems, and I often say that they're so big that it's very difficult for some of the systems out there, the legacy providers, to actually introduce even a small shift or a small change into their system. But eventually, that has to happen.
Correct.
Right. Mariam also touched upon a topic that is the industry or are the solutions really implementing AI fast enough as we should? What do you guys, both of you think? Are we implementing as industry as a whole? Are we implementing AI fast enough, or are there still a lot of gaps to cover?
Kamaljeet, you go first.
I think fraudsters are way ahead of us, unfortunately. That's how I've personally seen in the market, and that's not something to be very happy about, but that's what it is. So the way the fraudsters, the money launderers are adopting the technology and being innovative, we as a financial institute have a long way to go. I wouldn't say that the banks are not trying to adopt the technology. However, we still see a lot of gaps. One of the biggest gap is skill set. You can definitely buy technology, you can invest in the best software, but if your manpower is not trained enough to use it, everything goes to zero. As I said a couple of minutes back, that our AI is as good as the input. Whatever input I'm gonna give, I'll get same quality of output. So that's where I see personally a very big uh, you know a gap. At the same time, say there are certain jurisdictions and some industries which are not adopting AI very fast. Of course, they have their own reasons to believe why not, but the speed of fraudsters adopting technology is faster than us.
Yeah.
Mariam.
Yes, and I would like to just, take an extension from the point that you mentioned that, there is a learning gap among the compliance people. And that gaps are impacting how the demand is coming to the tech products, the rec tech products. What is the demand coming to us? The demand for a sophisticated solution is not as much as demand for a solution that can match a name and tell you if it is a yes or a no. So the most of the times, the compliance is, you can say, influenced by the fear of regulator. In that case, the primary agenda behind buying a system or doing the compliance from the very beginning is to check boxes for most of the the entities, because we have to see like how many of the entities that are using the systems and are compliant are banks or fintechs and xyz. Now even DNFBPs are a part of that. So the majority of the demand coming is for a very basic system because they want to make it easier for themselves to use the system. But those who are targeting compliance as an integrity, you can say, question, that we have to do it because we want to fight the fraud. We have to do it because we have to stay ahead of our competition as well. We want to be, someone who is irreplaceable for its compliant other customers, and we want to grab a bigger market. So there are a very small portion of companies of our target client who is actually asking us these questions. So maybe this is one of the reasons that the regtech industry is not going very fast in adoption of AI. And then of course, the brings me back to the same thing. You implement one change today, you invest a lot into that, and the other thing comes up in like after a week. So are those big elephants really ready to impose those changes? No, not every business is ready to go into the agile mode and putting their products into the area where, okay, fine, we do the customization, we do certain AI element into that. So yes, these are some of the things that I see happening around the industry.
Right. So following up, Kamanjeet, where do you think this agentic AI has helped AML industry as a whole or AML outcomes as a whole? And where, another important question follow up, where exactly has it failed? That's the more interesting part, yeah.
Correct. So basically, first I'll talk about advantages, which I have touched upon before as well. One, that it doesn't follow a static rule-based AML model. It adapts. It see the particular transaction, customer, KYC, and then take the action accordingly. One element which has always been pain area for central banks across the world is the regular KYC. The banks generally think KYC is a process which needs to be done at the beginning of the relationship with the customer. Though time to time, central bank for most of the countries been emphasizing that KYC should be done during the life cycle of the customer. Today, a person may be a gardener. After 3 years, a customer may start a parallel business of cryptocurrency. But my KYC doesn't reflect that because the banks have not done re KYCs. Doing re KYC in today's scenario where bank officers are already overworked seems like too much to handle. So, with the help of agentic AI, KYC is happening continuously so that each and every element which is added to the customer's profile is being updated. The risk classifications have been matched. Is the customer still a low risk or has been moved to medium or high risk customer? So that is one of the advantage we see, the continuous KYC. Secondly, agentic KYC, agentic AI helps us doing multitasking, investigation to transaction monitoring to KYC to filing SAR and to follow up. So those things are happening parallelly, which ease out the life of officer to look at the high risk cases. The third, that it also collect data from multiple data points. It doesn't work in silos. It picks up the information from multiple sources to understand whether this particular transaction is actually genuine or not. So those kind of things which are happening are very, very good part of agentic AI because that's happening at real time and dynamic basis. If I talk about what is something which is still a problem area, one, that transparency and traceability is still not there. Though we have come a long way from where we were, still you just cannot take the result of AI, you cannot present it to the regulators today. Technology is not answerable to regulator. We are. We have seen the rise in the penalties. As per one of the report which I recall, in European Union itself, the penalties have gone up by 700% or so. Now that's something where regulators are also want answers. If this is what it is, tell me why, how. So that black box part of AI is still a problem. Many times we don't know how AI is arriving to a conclusion. If, as a human, if I have to arrive to that conclusion, I may or may not. There are certain data points, there are certain logics. With the help, with the AI, sometimes it's missing. And another thing which I think many of us have experienced, hallucination. Sometimes AI invents things which do not exist. Couple of days back, I was taking help of AI for one of my cases just to understand the background of those kind of cases. And suddenly I was presented a case study saying it's a real life case study. And I was very surprised that I'm just not aware of it. When I started searching on Google and multiple sources, I just could not find it. So that's very worrisome because what if I would blindly picked up that case and would have cited in one of my reports? It would have been a big problem. So that is one of the area where I think today we have a problem with AI is that we don't know how that conclusion is being done. Transparency is missing.
Right, right. Um, so, you know, another follow-up question that I would like to ask is, what do you think is more important for a financial institution's compliance team or a bank's compliance team? Reducing false positive or is reducing false negative? You know, just a slightly out of topic question, but what do
The
you think is
very
more?
answer is reducing false negative. For a moment, let's assume it's fine to suspect on innocent, but it's just not fine to let the guilty go. Because money laundering is not just an act of or it's not just an offense related to money, but it's very closely linked to terrorism. And with one negligence, something very serious can happen anywhere in the world. So false negative has to be reduced any day at any cost.
Right. So, with false negative, it primarily boils down to having a better data quality, right? How do you think banks could improve data quality and timeliness?
So it's a tricky question, though, since every country has its own data privacy acts. For example, we have GDPR, then India has its own DPDP. So with data privacy, sometimes we may not have access to the complete data, but at the same time, if you will not get enough data to the artificial intelligence, your decision making may be wrong. So I think it's a tough road, right? But at the same time, whatever data can be accessed in the right way, in a legal way, that data need to be sanitized time to time. Because as I repeatedly said that if my input itself is wrong, my output can never be right. Doesn't matter how smart my technology is. So the data quality needs to be definitely improved, of
Hmm.
course, within the legal boundaries.
Right. Coming switching from data quality and data coverage, you know, many banks and many financial institutions also have to worry about revenues and profits and revenue loss at customers as well. So, they can't really have more friction towards their customers, and they would rather have an easier compliance rather than, lose their valuable customers. What do you think? It's an open question to both of you. Is excessive AML compliance, is it causing banks to lose valuable customers? And how can, banks strike a perfect balance between customer retention and risk mitigation?
So Kamaljeet is actually, a subject matter expert here, but I just have a comment to, in the answer that I think the thing again is that if they do it correctly, the often when we talk to the compliance people, they say that the idea should not be to de-risk, but the idea should be to manage the risk. So if you go after totally eliminating the risk, then you go towards over compliance. If the idea is to manage the risk, and this is that often the banks, what they do is that they have multiple compliance within the one compliance department. There are multiple departments that are managing different elements of the whole compliance journey. So that is, of course, one of the things that they are doing, and more banks and other institutions should actually definitely adopt that. This is one of the things that I just wanted to jump in and share. And then, of course, the rest is, of course, Kamaljeet's area of expertise, because she has spent her life with the compliance and the banks, of course.
So on the lighter side, I'll say that risk needs to be taken. Even Spider-Man takes risk, correct? But how much risk needs to be taken is something this call has to be taken by bank. I'm an ex-banker myself, and I've seen that the operations and compliance team never share a very good rapport. One of the reasons is that operation wants numbers. They more customer, more loans, and compliance. They see compliance as a villain because compliance will come and say, "Hey, we don't want this customer. We don't want this customer." So ultimately, both are equally important, right? So we cannot say that compliance is important and operation is not. Of course, both have their own very, very significant role to play. How it can be balanced, though There is no straightforward answer to that. But still, as I said, a risk has to be defined in a tolerable limits. And then bank has to take a call that within this boundary, we are okay to take a risk. But beyond that, we have to say no to the customer. One of the biggest challenge we see in banking is private banking customers. They are HNIs, they are celebrities, they're politicians. One single account can give a real good profitability to the bank. But with this customer comes a very high level of risk. And many a time banks ends up pleasing that particular HNI because they fear that what if the customer goes somewhere else? And with this comes deviations. With this, risk goes higher. So that call has to be taken by bank itself without regulators pitching in and saying something. Bank has to decide whether they want to take that much risk or not. For example, in India, Reserve Bank of India has given a specific percentage that a bank should not lend to a group of company beyond that percentage so that they are not exposed to that risk. What if anything goes wrong with that group of company? That's too much of risk to take. So those thumb rules are definitely set by the central bank. But beyond that, it is own judgment of bank which has to be taken.
Okay. So, with that judgment, how do you think a bank or any banks, they can build risk-based culture to combat this money laundering? What exactly is, how does a true risk-based AML culture look like in practice?
So normally in our audits also there is something called risk-based audit. But unfortunately, how some auditors look at it, while doing audit, when they come across certain risks, they audit that. Well, this is not called risk-based audit. Similarly, risk-based AML is not where you have onboarded a customer and now you're looking at risk and trying to do something about it. That risk has to be taken and seen on step one. If a wrong customer enters, there is no way anything right is going to happen in the bank. Sooner or later, the bank will suffer. The bank's reputation, the country's reputation will suddenly come into picture. So bank should do proper due diligence in the beginning. At the same time, that due diligence should also be done time to time so that banks take the customer, maintain their operation profitability, but at the same time, do not compromise. When I say judgment of bank, bank's judgment should not be basis assumptions. It should be basis the facts, which they can see and they should not ignore.
All right, Mariam, how about you?
Yeah, exactly. One thing is that, of course, all the technical elements that Kamaljeet mentioned are, of course, 100% right and aligns with what should be done. Um, One of the important things here is that if we actually talks about, because this is more towards the operational element as well, that how the banks are operating. So it's not only when it comes to the operations, it's not primarily their compliance people who are going to be on the fronts. So sometimes, as I'm talking from the point of view of a consumer here, who's a consumer of the banking services. So sometimes what happens is that a penalty happens somewhere in the country, and all of a sudden the bank that you're using, or any way you're planning your financial systems and your payments and everything. So another new layer of security is added on the regular bank consumer. So of course the big accounts are very, very important for the banks, and especially in an economy like the UAE, especially where a lot of real estate transactions and big industries are available, and huge transactions are there. But the small consumer is also there. So when they add up more security layers with the idea of de-risking instead of risk management, they demotivate their user, and that user is sometimes forced to shift to another bank, which most of the times they don't want to do, but they do it because not everyone has the equal financial literacy of what should be their banking system that they should be choosing. And okay, fine, why are all of a sudden I have to go and do a verification of every payment on my bank app and not an OTP and all these things. So in a country like UAE, where people from around the globe are here working, it's and then the financial literacy is not equal. So this is very important element that I think the banks should take into consideration when they are designing their risk mitigation culture. That look at that smaller chunk as well, which whose transactions could be small, but they are a bigger chunk of your customer base that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And not to mention, these customers pay a lot in small fee daily basis, like transaction, app, XYZ, all these things. So yeah, this is one of the things.
Correct.
So,
And also, yeah, sorry. Just to add one last line, that ethics never flow from bottom to top. It
Yeah.
always flows from top to bottom. So if we are talking about the culture of risk mitigation, integrity in the banks, the board has to set that example. The top has to set the tone, and then everything goes according to that. If the tone at the top is that, hey, we want business, I just don't care about the risk about the customer, same thing will happen in the entire bank or entire financial institute. However, if the top says that we will only take the customer with this kind of risk, and this is something which will say complete no, now the same culture will transform with the entire.
Yeah, doesn't that circle back to the element that the training and the learning is equally important at all levels, a junior compliance officer to the decision makers who are residing the boards?
I
Absolutely.
mean, that's a good point. You mentioned financial literacy, and I was just going to ask this question of how critical do you think that skills, how important are skills as compared to having a theoretical knowledge? How important are practical skills, and how exactly can AI improve compliance officers skills or efficiencies? Kawaljeet, this would be more your question. How exactly are skills better as compared to theory?
So if I give my example, I learned fraud investigation on the job. Before that, I did certain certification. I learned the theory, but only theory. So it was basically I was driving the car and not knowing how to drive the car. With the booklet, I was trying to drive. So I learned that hard way. I don't want people to go through the same path. One of the reasons that we initiated the certification for professionals and retail market in our Global Association of Forensic Accountant to give the practical knowledge of fraud investigations. Each time we talk about fraud investigation, forensic accounting, anti-money laundering, it has to be with practical only. And the practical also is something where students are able to do it on their own. I can teach you the best things on screen. And that time we also get a feel that, okay, I learned everything. The problem actually arises when you start doing it. I've been into corporate myself a long time. I've taken a lot of interviews, people who have fantastic grades, bestest of the degrees, but back of my mind, what will I do with this person? I don't have a time to train. What would I do with this person? So that's exactly where I see a big gap between the employability and the candidates. So that is my sincere take that each time we are learning any skill, specifically anti-money laundering kinds or investigation kinds, it has to go with practical. And that is where we have recently launched a certification called Certification in Anti-Money Laundering, CML, where we are not only teaching the concept, we are also giving the hands-on data to the participants to try their hands-on. Let them do it. In fact, AML Watch has been really, really supportive. We're providing their tools and say, hey, if somebody wants to see how screening happens behind the scene, please do it. So we've been doing together, and it's a fantastic experience.
Perfect. So Miriam, coming towards you, um, how do you think AML Watcher's futuristic solutions, how are they a win for professionals?
Okay, so I'll be picking up from the real case studies that we have encountered with the compliance people that I talk to like on a daily basis. So so because I spent 8 years in the tech industry, I've seen so many solutions coming in, going out. So of course, one of the most important thing is that when people come to us from different areas, from governments, from banks to small fintechs, so one of the most important element is that they're looking for something that make their lives easier, not more complex, not a system that gives them a 10-page report, but the data in that report is not, structured to give them an insight that can help them take a decision right away. So that is, of course, one of the things that we solved for the audience out there. That the system is pretty easy to use, and within the system there are some of the elements that are kept agile, open according to their requirements, that that it adjusts with their compliance policy. So that is very, very important. That kind of agility should be there, especially when you are claiming the system is using AI, and when you are depending on data. You're not depending on some like 1,000 years old data set, and you're like, no, it will stay the same for a whole over decade. No, it's going to change on a daily basis. So you should stay agile. That doesn't make sense, a system depending on a data set that's not being updated for months. And the other very important element is, of course, the transliteration algorithms that we use. Again, it makes the lives easier. It gives you better results in terms of, you can say, the false, reducing the false negatives, as Kamaljeet said, that should be reduced. False positive is something that you can do, but even that we have covered with the new True Check feature that further helps you to take the right decision. That okay, you are not bombarded with 20 right matches of the name. Okay, go ahead, use the True Check. It will help you take the decision. So yeah, and the data, of course, another very important element, that when the compliance officers that come to us, they're looking for the data that they can depend on, and the data that is updated, because often they ask, when do you update your data? And okay, you using this, you buying data from X private party, Y private party, and no, we don't. This is, of course, the very good thing, that direct integration with 1,000+ data sources, and keeps it updated according to their requirements, helps them add their own data, helps them change the system according to their policies, their risk scores, the risk appetite of their own organization. So, and then I can, of course, continue talking about how the problems are there that we're solving. But I would like to stick to the topic that, for the banking industry and the AI. So yes, with the transliteration, we've solved the problem for some banks here in the Arab region because of the transliteration thing. The language is pretty difficult for the most of the systems to understand. They cannot differentiate one Muhammad from the other Muhammad. So yeah, and this element, yes, of course, remains there. And one very important element is that we give you a complete journey. You come to us, and it's like, for the banks especially, I would say that, because I had banks, a couple of banks from Egypt, and some from, I think it was from Jordan as well. They came to us because they wanted to add some AI element into their compliance journey. And I don't want to drop names. I don't like it, like throwing a shade on anyone. So they are like, we have three other systems integrated into our compliance journey, but we need to add an AI element. Do you have that AI element? Then we use you. So this is how the banks are actually adopting AI, and this is how we are solving it for them. So yeah, and please go ahead and add something if I missed it.
Another point that Kamaljit also mentioned early on was how the name is pronounced, right? It's like
Yes.
Ram in India. If a non-Indian person, pronounce it Rama. So the phonetics of how the name sounds exactly, that's also pretty important. You mentioned transliteration, translation, the phonetics of how exactly a compliance officer or a local economy would perceive that name. That is very important. So
Hmm.
even in a globalized economy, having a localized solution to a local solution to your country, your economy, your industry is very important. And scaling that for every single country, for every single language, that is pretty important. And again, mention data. That is, I think, the backbone of
Yeah.
having a comprehensive AML screening solution. Without data, you're basically nothing, right?
True.
So, that was our webinar. To sum it up, we've touched upon how agentic AI helps AML solution, how AI is now a necessity as compared to a nice to have solution, how fraudsters are being more advanced, and how our industry is trying really hard to catch up with them. And then, we also mentioned of how we need to have that balance of not to add more friction, but not to even, have low risk. So we need to strike that balance for the banks so they don't lose their potential clients and revenue, and also have that risk factor enabled to the client. So Kawaljeet, any closing points from your side?
Yeah, it was really pleasure to connect with all of you and to all the participants and viewers who are watching this. If you really want to experience the anti-money laundering in practical way, we have GAFA has CAML sessions, which is open for retail market now. Earlier, it was just restricted to the businesses, but now it is open for all the professionals across the world. So if you are keen, you can definitely touch base with either directly with us or AML Watcher team, and we'll be really, really happy to take you on this journey together. So that's my point.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Mariam, any closing remarks?
Yeah, just one that, of course, it has been pretty, can say, engaging one, and I just didn't realize that it ended so quickly. And yes, of course, there is. I just would like to say two things. One is that, of course, AI is important to be added into the current compliance systems and the processes, and but that should be done with, you can say. Positive conscience towards, like, okay, what we are doing and why we are doing, maintaining the integrity and all these things, because of course at the end of the day the human element should stay there and it will be staying, and wherever it has been adopted properly, the human element has been there. So this leads to the other part, that okay, in order to make sure that that human element is actually the one that could make a good decision and a good impact, should be the one who has not only an understanding of how compliance is done, what are the 10 rules that should be followed to screen a user or a transaction, but also how the compliance is being adopted in the bank where they're working, and how the systems are evolving around that. So yes, that of course, that is how I would like to sum it up, that continuous learning for the humans and AI is of course the key.
Perfect, perfect. All right, guys, it was lovely having you guys on this webinar. I'm sure audience loved our webinar. It was, on how agentic AI helps AML solutions for banks, for different clients, to minimize risk, to also increase revenue, and also reduce costs. And also we touched upon, false negatives, false positives as well, and especially training program by Kawalji.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that
Thank you
was
so
that.
much.
Thank you so much,